for many, many years. I can recall a movement in the early 90s, another movement in the later 90s. There was some additional discussion just last year. We have never, our legislature in Michigan has never formally taken up that discussion in the form of a bill introduced. So that's really all I can tell you today. I think it periodically, and as all the other states, there were originally 6 or 8 states from way back. You have to realize that Michigan had a special education mandatory law beginning actually in 1973, prior to any federal law. And we were among this handful of states, probably 6 or 8 of us, that had a mandate to identify and serve students with disabilities prior to federal law. And our mandate has always been birth through 26. That's where we started, and here we are almost 30 years later, 40 years, sorry. Now you're getting close to how long I've been around. I don't even want to tell you where my first classroom was, my first year of teaching before mandatory. But nevertheless, I'm still here, standing on my own. So the special ed department, and that was a good question, is made up of me, and then I have 2 managers. John Cloft is my finance manager. Some of you may know Lena Montgomery or have worked with Lena. Lena is our early on coordinator, so she focuses on all those services and work with partner agencies for our birth through 3 children who don't necessarily have special ed services. And then there are 8 consultants who work under my direction, and they all have varying areas of expertise. So when I take you to the Wayne Risa website, you'll see this listing, you'll see contact numbers and things like that. This is our county, which I'm sure some of you who do traveling all across the county are very familiar with. We are obviously, as you probably know, the largest county in the state. We are the most populous, and we far exceed any of even our neighboring large counties in terms of our student population. The coloring on this map doesn't have as much significance. I'll show you our next map. What I do want to just correct, this 99 plus public school academies or charter schools, we are now at 101 officially, with an additional, I believe, 4 or 5 who have gone through the very first level of approval with MDE. So that's a growing network of options for parents. This is just the listing of the local school districts that have all been in place for many, many years. And if you go back to that first map, you're able to see who's where. You all who live in Wayne County, you probably know plenty about your own school district because, of course, I'm sure some of you have children, so you're probably much more familiar with what's going on in each of your districts, perhaps. Are any of you parents of students with disabilities, if you're willing to? Okay, so you're going to be our experts in the audience, hopefully, to lend your version of how it goes. Again, when we look at these numbers, These numbers are our official numbers from last year. So I want you to remember that you may, in a couple of months, see some different numbers because this is an evolving set of information. Student population. Close to our count last year was 235,940 students totally. And those are in those 34 public schools. In our public school academies, we had another 59,387, up from 53,000 the previous year. So you can see this is a growing number, this is a decreasing number. There are only so many children. So we're all, some say vying for the same children. We're all working to serve all children wherever they are. So our total, 295,300, but you can see totally we were down a bit. We've faced over the last 4 years population decreases just by virtue of families and folks having to leave the state to go look for work elsewhere. Has been fairly impactful. Number of schools. So not only are we dealing with all those little individual children, but they're all in a lot of locations. So within Detroit Public Schools, we had at the time 221 children or schools. You can see, Detroit is ever evolving in terms of its service delivery and its population, and so this number is likely considerably lower when school opens this fall. We're not quite sure where all the open schools will be. Out Wayne County, meaning aside from Detroit, there are 352 separate school buildings. Some large, some really tiny. Teachers. Within the city of Detroit, again a year ago, approximately 6,200 teachers. Out Wayne County, another 14,007. So total of 21,000 teachers, all teachers, gen ed, special ed, science, math. So just a little bit of picture about education in Wayne County. Big job. Now let's talk a little more about special education students. Who, and I say we, who are we? What do we represent? So this is another look at our county and what we do at Wayne RESA in order to be efficient in our service delivery is divide the county into 3 regions. And the county is divided not necessarily by number of school districts, but by population. So you can see that the eastern region is really made up of 5 districts: Detroit, Highland Park, Hamtramck, Harper Woods, and Grosse Pointe. But population-wise, that is fairly equal to Out County. As our demographics change, we have to begin to revisit this. Downriver, you can see there's a lot of little districts downriver. So the number of districts is larger, 16. Geographically, it's about the same as the western region, which has 12 districts in it, but we have several fairly large districts with lots of students. Van Buren looks very large, but this is a fairly rural area, so the population here is not as great as you might see in a Wayne Westland that's smaller. For our service delivery at Wayne Risa in terms of support of our districts, we have one of the consultants assigned to each of the regions to be the primary contact to support families and schools. We all have other areas that we function in, but that's how we keep our services organized. And within each region, we have an almost complete set of all the types of programs that might be available. We have one program, which is our Total Communication for Deaf and Hard of Hearing students. It's a small population, so we have Dearborn, who serves both Western and Downriver for those children, classrooms located in Dearborn. And then Detroit operates that component for all of the Eastern region. So that's the only program where we just have 2 instead of 3. We have programs for the vision impaired in Western, in Downriver, and one in Eastern. So we try to have everything available so that children are not on transportation for really long amounts of time. Now we're going to look at some of our special education totals, numbers of students with disabilities. In 2000, and this is our total special ed count, and you have to remember, we now do a single count for students with disabilities. Starting last year, that count is on the first Wednesday in October. The federal law, that IDEA law that I mentioned, requires that every state conduct an unduplicated count by December 1. And so we used to do it on December 1. And then we moved it up a little bit or back a little bit and did it in a day in November. Michigan does a state count. That used to be that big fourth Friday or a count, and then it was the fourth Wednesday where you had to get all the kids in school so we could make sure we had all the seats filled. And that is what generated our state funding for schools. So we were doing 2 very comprehensive counts, one for the state, one for the federal government. And last year we combined the counts onto one day. And so now we do that count on the 3rd Wednesday in October. So you see some of these dates were a bit different. For the most importance, you can see that our numbers of students with disabilities, of course, has decreased from 45,000 in 2009 to 40,009 a year ago on October the 5th, 2011. These are just the count vehicles. This is MISIS, the Michigan, I forgot what the C stands for, but since we don't use it anymore, we now use what a system called MSDS, which is the Michigan Student Data Services Count. So the percent of difference from 2010 to 2011 is we dropped almost 2% students with disabilities. Are we not identifying? It's probably more students are moving. Question? It's a variety of reasons, but the trend overall with our student population is that it's decreasing. So when you saw that first slide where the total population had decreased, certainly some of those children are students with disabilities. And so anytime you have a decrease in population, it it impacts all counts that you do of subgroups. The question is it's not that they cease to have disabilities. I think that I don't have any statistics. We're going to look at some of the different categories of eligibility that are decreasing and some are increasing. So it isn't that we are not still under an obligation for what we call child find. That's another component of the IDEA law, which requires that school districts find students with disabilities. There has to be an effort to publicize in your community that special ed services are available. Right about now or in September, you will see in your school